G'day. In a previous video I took this height gauge apart and cleaned it all up, made a replacement wheel for the back, took off years worth of grime and all that sort of thing. But the one thing that I didn't get round to doing was repainting the base and the back of the, I guess you'd call it a carriage or something like that. Due to a combination of events, we actually had a nice day, probably 3 or 4 months before I was expecting to be able to do it, and so I got round to do it. So today I've done a little bit on showing you how to mask things up. I've squirted some paint on. You don't get to watch the paint dry, unfortunately, and reassembled. So it's all ready to go. I've squared up the beam, and yes, as far as I'm concerned, you know, the job is done. For some time I've been meaning to do something on masking things up for paint, because once again it's one of those things that unless you start looking at it, you may not realise there are a few tricks you can utilise. So these are the two parts that I wanted to repaint off the Mediterranean height gauge. I've been faced with an unexpectedly sunny day, and being, for reasons beyond my control, home from work, so I thought, well, why not? So first thing that I've done here is I've run these over with a wire wheel to remove all the loose paint. In fact, pretty much all the paint. That was all pretty shocking. If you've got sound paint on there, you can just run across with a sanding disc or something like that and take that off, but these ones I've done with a wire wheel. Once I'm happy with the cleanup that I've got, I've then given things a bit of a clean with some acetone. You can use terps, you can use whatever is compatible with your paint. I use the Kill Rust stuff, not sponsored, but I find it's pretty good, and they suggest cleaning surfaces with terp, so that's another option. Now, I'm going to put some tape on here to mask things up, and you need to remember, you know, what are the important surfaces. So on this one, it's this one and this one need to be masked, as well as in here and around this boss where the scriber attaches. On this one, it's basically this surface and in here. That's painted in there, but that paint to me looks like it's in reasonable nick, so I'm not going to bother with repainting that. That can stay black. What I am going to put on there is a gunmetal hammer tone sort of finish. I haven't got the green that these were originally painted in, but that'll do for me. But one thing you do need to think about before you start masking things up is how you're going to hold on to these things. So with this, I'm going to use a bit of wire. I've got some hooks that I hang on a frame out the back. So that's for that one. For this one, I think I'll probably go through the base, like so. So for this one, because I'm hanging from this top piece here, any paint runoff will accumulate down here. Okay. On this one, because I'm hanging here, the paint runoff will accumulate down here. Now that'll be masked, so that won't worry me too much, but just something to think about. For masking, I use plain tape, and I've actually got some, looks like it's inch and a half maybe, tape, and I'm just going to put that on there. It's not a big deal. In fact, we'll do some of that now. Okay, a bit of non-time lapse there. So I've gone and masked these up. This is basically the bare surfaces, the bare metal surfaces, plus the inside here and the bare metal surface there. It doesn't matter too much if you're not quite right. I mean, it's nice if you can, but for instance there's a little corner which I've missed. I'll be able to scrape that off easily with when it's painted. It's not going to be the end of the world, but the whole idea behind masking is to try and save yourself time having to clean things up afterwards. So that's all good. Depending on how dirty your hands are, you can give that another wipe over with some solvent if you like, but there you go. This one I haven't quite finished yet because I wanted to show you this. That's a scalpel blade. Now, some people will say, oh yeah, well you cut that across. what I've found is if you drag that blade, and you can even do it with something like a steel rule, across that sharp edge, right, that cuts the tape beautifully on that edge. Okay, and so if you're trying to get a nice neat line for your tape, right, that's the way to do it, and that'll give you a nice line. Now when I paint, I like to take off the masking tape, you know, once the paint is basically touch dry, before it's hardened up. I like to take the tape off so that at least the edges have a chance to heal. I don't know whether it does any good or not, but that's the way I do it. So I've got all this done. I'll finish cleaning that up, take out the back with the rattle can, give it a couple of coats, and see how it all works out. Back again with the painted parts. I'm now going to take the masking off. Now, two reasons for that. One is I like to give the paint at the edges a chance to sort of heal a little bit. If it's still soft underneath the skin, it can flow a little bit. The other reason is that masking tape usually goes a bit haywire after a few days, and so if you leave it on there, you know, you get gummed up adhesive and all the rest of it. So I'm just using a blade here to find myself a corner. And fingers crossed this will peel away. Yep. There we go. So you can see that there's quite a nice edge there. Paint's come up along there, along there, and then I've got the clean edge of the bare metal. Anyway, that's my version of how you mask things up and tape things and all the rest of it. I'm going to let these sit for another, probably the rest of the week, I think. Just because the paint will although it's touch dry, it'll still take a little bit of time to become fully dry, and I prefer it to be that way before I try to install it on the height gauge. But there we go. Just a few tips on how I paint stuff. Paint's dry, or at least dry enough to reassemble. This particular, the Kilrust stuff apparently takes about 7 days to fully harden. So this won't be fully hardened for a while, but it's good enough. So I'm just going to reassemble now. I'm going to put a smear of Vaseline down the bottom here, because although this is stainless steel, I'd just like to make sure that the corrosion is, shall we say, kept at bay. Now that goes in there, and there's a screw, comes in here. As you can see, I've got these two screws in loosely. I've also got the two underneath in loosely, because what I wanted to do was get at my cylindrical square, which, as I was saying before, is about the closest thing I've got here to being absolutely square, and then just tighten these up so that the beam is perpendicular to the surface. For the amount that it was out, it's probably not going to matter too much, but at the same time, it's one of those things that if you can minimize an error, then you may as well get along and do that. So that's tightened there, and that's all good. That's square. I can pop this back down again now. I'll re-zero that in a moment, but for the meantime, that's all good. Then it's a matter of putting these bits on. I won't bore you with most of this, but a couple of things here. There's a hole in the bottom of the shim that goes in, where did I put it? That goes in here. So one of the grub screws has actually got a little pip on the end. I don't know whether you'll be able to see that. So that's the one that goes in the bottom here to line up with that shim. The other one just goes in there, and they're adjusted up so you get a nice sort of firm sliding motion, and all the rest. So I'll put this together. all back together again. So the sequence I used was basically putting the what would you call it, shim, I guess, copper shim inside here, putting that on the beam, putting the plates on. I've got those two adjustment screws screwed up to be so it's a what would you call that, a firm sliding fit. Okay, you don't want it too sloppy because it means when you tighten up the locking screw, you could tilt your stylus, one way or the other, which might, is particularly if you're using it for measuring, might disrupt things a little bit. But other than that, all good. If these holes were bigger, I probably would have masked them, whether by putting a dummy screw in there or just a wad of paper or something. As it is, they were fine, but if you do get a little bit of paint in them, nothing stopping you running a tap down there to clear them out. But that's it. The sort of the completed reconditioned mother wouldn't recognise it height gauge. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you for the next one.